Welcome back to the Common Sense Crusade. As we've been discussing, the Archbishop of York has suggested the Lord's Prayer is problematic due to the oppressively patriarchal reference to Our Father. So I took to Twitter and asked, is the C of E right? Is it time to update the Lord's Prayer? The results are in. 85% of you said it's blasphemy to update the Lord's Prayer, and 8.8% of you said it's time to modernise. 6.2% of you said other things in the comments. You can check those out on our Twitter. Thank you for taking part. Rewiring the West is a 5-part video series all about meaningful living by exploring the hidden art and the history of the Vatican. Evan Amato is the face of it, and he's also written a book, Keys to Life, all about his discoveries. And he's flown in all the way from Italy to tell us about it. First of all, welcome, Evan. Thank you so much for making the effort to come here from Italy.
Yeah, thank you.
What is your project?
Rewire the West. So Rewire the West, essentially what it wants to do is, it is pulling from the classics, life lesson from the classics, and conveying those to modern audiences. Mm-hmm. I think perhaps it was the Jesuits who referred to the classics as hooks to catch souls.
Okay.
And
some Christians have said that too.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, it's something that I really pulled a lot of inspiration from, and I think that there's so much rich history. I've experienced a lot in my life with different art, literature, and all these things. But this one series in question, I actually decided, you know, let's get out of the books for a little bit. Let's go to Rome and film something at the Vatican. And so it's essentially talking about self-development from the life lessons and all the history that's uncovered, obviously, in the history of the Church.
Why do you think the West needs rewiring?
Oof, that's a loaded question. If you ask my wife, she'd say it's because of the French Revolution and everything went wrong there. But I think, I think we all know that there's a malaise, you know, culturally. We don't feel like things are where they should be. No. And obviously we feel that way because there is something that is higher that we ought to be pointing to. You can't feel that something's wrong unless you've experienced something that is right or that you know there could be something right. And so I think this cultural malaise that we're experiencing, it wears people down, particularly through the decay of beauty, I think, above all, in culture, and beauty in small things. You know, this isn't like, you know, everything that you have needs to be super ornate, but just, we see this in the content we consume, in, you know, the statues, public art, and a lot of just, you know, the way that we comport ourselves with others, even public decency on public transportation, for example. And so anyways, this return to beauty is needed. Dostoevsky said, beauty will save the world. And I think, more importantly, there's a really important connection between beauty and truth. And if we believe God to be the culmination of all truth, well, God is also the culmination of all beauty. There's not an ounce of God that isn't immensely beautiful. And so if God is all truth and all beauty, then a return to beauty is what also orients ourselves to the divine. It allows us to essentially orient ourselves as we should be in relationship to others.
I love this because the transcendentals of truth, beauty, and goodness are where we find God. They direct our gaze back towards God. And I feel like at the moment in our culture, these things are being attacked. The truth is constantly being attacked. Goodness is being attacked, but beauty as well. When we look around us today, anything that's built in the 21st century is generally ugly. You know, new buildings, for example, glass, steel, if not concrete. Nothing is built with a bigger purpose. And so is your project, I believe it is, trying to recenter that focus and trying to bring beauty back into our lives?
Absolutely, absolutely. And trying to show the importance of it. Just this morning, so my flight was delayed about 3 hours this morning, and I had a lot of extra time to read. So while I was reading, I pulled a little bit from Tasso. He's this Italian poet. Stopping any Italian on the street, they knew who Tasso is. I mean, second in line to Dante, but virtually unknown in the English-speaking world, unfortunately. But he has this great line that talks about, it says something along the lines of, men have hearts that poetry will win when the truth is seasoned in beautiful rhyme. It wins those hearts. So essentially, when you take something, he was referring to poetry, but when you take an art form, and when the truth is seasoned in sweet rhyme, it lures and leads men in, essentially, something like that. But what I'm trying to get at is that this idea is that the beauty is what conveys the truth. It's what pulls you into truth. Okay? Men have hearts, sweet poetry will win. That's the actual line. And so, sweet poetry, well, what about sweet art? What about sweet beauty? What about, you know, all these different things? They pull you to them. So obviously, if you're going to attack truth, where you start, you actually start with beauty. And you kill the ideal of it. You just say that, oh no, beauty is objective, or it doesn't exist. Because if you destroy that, you're also destroying the idea of truth.
And it's an affront to God. It's an affront to
Absolutely.
God. When did art stop being art? Because when I look around at the Tate Modern, for example, and I look at Tracy Emin's messed up bed, I think that's no art because there's no mastery, there's no skill involved, and it's not beautiful, it's not good or truthful either. But art used to be, I mean, look at for me, the Renaissance period is the peak of Western civilization, when art was not about us. It wasn't the selfish creator trying to put his mark on the world, or it wasn't always. It was often about reminding people about the presence of God. When do you think that stopped being the case?
I'm not sure the exact date that would be, but I know that there's a pivotal moment. And that pivotal moment is when Duchamp, as we know, his urinal that he put in the art museum. I think that's something that's really key. But the actual thing that people often miss is that, in fact, him putting the urinal in the art museum was not him trying to pass the urinal as art. It was him saying, the elite is so ridiculous that I can submit this as art and it will get in. So he was actually in on the joke. And so I think if you want to look up the date of that, and then I'd go back at least a generation, because the cultural elite had to have gotten to the position where they were able to say, you know, this is essentially what it is. But maybe to actually zoom out and get more specific, I think truly after World War I in particular, you see this on a lot of continental art. Surrealism that developed out of Europe right after the First World War was so absurd and chaotic because people just had experienced something that's so incredibly traumatic. And so I think it was a people, if you want to look at it gracefully, I think it's a people really trying to come to terms with this is senseless destruction, and how do we handle that? And so part of what perhaps the generation that grew up in the aftermath of that, what they said is that beauty doesn't exist. It's just the world is too terrible that this ideal can actually exist, and stuff stem from that.
So is there a particular period or a particular group of artists that your work is focusing on?
No, I love to pull from the rich cultural tradition that we have in Western culture. When I first started this project, one of my friends' mom said, "What about the East?" I said, the East has many beautiful things, but you know, the West, we have such an incredible cultural inheritance of music, of art, of literature. There's so much to pull from. Dante, Shakespeare, you know, Chaucer, all these people. Not obviously Bach, Beethoven, Mozart. You could go on for days, and there's so much to explore. And I think really, at least in my education, I don't know how yours was, but I never truly got the experience to be able to interact with those things, but those have been the things that have most saved my life. Like when I'm most overwhelmed with the craziness of the world, what do? I turn to beauty, and it's such a respite from all that chaos.
Absolutely. So where can people find your video product?
YouTube at Rewire the West is the name of the channel, and then there's also rewirethewest.com, on Twitter at Rewire the West. Anywhere you want to look.
Absolutely. We're showing some clips for our viewers at home right now. It is a beautiful project. I highly recommend this. You've also written a book. What's the book on, and when is that available?
So the book is called Keys to Life. It's available for pre-order now. If you watch any of the videos, there's a link in the description. And if you go on the website, there's also a page in the menu that'll take you to Rewire the West /Keys to Life. But essentially what it is it's looking at the keys to life, punning on obviously the keys to heaven and earth given to Peter, at the Vatican. So it's what are kind of the archetypal life lessons that we can take from these things. So for example, the last video in the series, it's talking about the story of the Appian Way, where Peter's heading outside of Rome, he comes across Jesus. Jesus asks, Quo vadis, where are you going? And Peter's like, oh, you know, I'm kind of getting out of Rome because, you know, I don't want to get all this stuff going on. It was crazy at the time. And Jesus said, all right, well, I'm on my way to Rome to be crucified. And so what does Peter do? Well, he has to turn back. So I essentially take this archetype, you know, in one of these chapters and expand on that and say, how is this something that we can learn in our life? Like, how can taking up your cross metaphorically in that way, in whatever struggle, whatever difficulty that you have, actually give you a life of meaning by turning around, heading into Rome, you know, going after the things that are most likely to cause you to suffer and struggle, but how the most meaning is found there. Absolutely.
That was profound. I want everyone to look up your stuff online. That was the author and founder of Rewire the West. Evan, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you so much.